Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. So glad to see you. This is our first big event for News is Out, so we're so pleased that you're here with us um, to talk about Project 2025. I'm Dana Pickley. I'm the managing director of News is Out, a queer media collaborative of 6 LGBTQ outlets: Bay Area Reporter, Dallas Voice, Philadelphia Gay News, Tag Magazine, Washington Blade, and Windy City Times.
And my name is Christopher Kane. I'm the Washington Blade's White House correspondent and senior politics reporter. I'm excited to be with you all tonight.
So we'll be your moderators for this evening's panel, and we'll be joined by incredible guests throughout the evening to discuss Project 2025 and its possible ramifications if it came to pass for the LGBTQ plus community. Now, you may be here because you're already familiar with Project 2025, or because you want to understand why this topic has made it into so many speeches by political candidates and at the DNC. Now, while mainstream media has only recently picked up on Project 2025, queer media has been sounding the alarm bells for over a year.
And Project 2025 is a 900-plus page policy playbook that was authored by the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank here in Washington, D.C. They've been around since the 1970s, but the organization has increasingly been influential in American politics. It was part of Donald Trump administration's transition team in 2016, helping to choose staff. And many of those staffers were actually influential in the creation of Project 2025, which is the blueprint for the next Republican administration.
Now, Donald Trump has tried to distance himself from Project 2025, but the playbook mentions him over 300 times. Project 2025 lays out a plan for a new Trump administration that includes limiting abortion access across the country, targeting immigrant communities with mass deportations, ending birthright citizenship, reshaping governmental departments like the Department of Education, and rolling back climate initiatives.
And everything Dana just mentioned ultimately affects the LGBTQ plus community, but Project 2025 also targets the community specifically. For example, Project 2025 seeks to dismantle LGBTQ protections, targeting non-discrimination policies, and removing inclusive language across federal agencies. The plan advocates for rolling back marriage equality, undermining workplace protections from Bostock v. Clayton County, that was a Supreme Court case in 2020, and narrowing anti-discrimination laws to prevent LGBTQ discrimination. It also seeks to ban transgender health care and falsely associates transgender identities with content like pornography.
Thanks, Chris. Now it's time to kick off our discussion and bring out our first guest, Chasten Buttigieg.
We're so excited to have Chasten here. Chasten grew up in northern Michigan. He's a teacher, advocate, and husband of 2020 presidential candidate and current U.S. Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg, of course. Chasten currently lives with Pete, their 2 children, Gus and Penelope, and their rescue dog, Buddy, in Traverse City, Michigan. His memoir, I Have Something to Tell You, was a New York Times bestseller in both the adult and young adult editions.
Chasten, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. What an official introduction. Thank you.
Are you okay with that?
I'm a Michigan girl myself, so I'm thrilled to see it.
Oh, fantastic. Whereabouts?
I grew up right outside of Detroit.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, greetings from chilly up north.
Thank you. So Project 2025 would unravel the ACA. I know that's an issue that's close to home for you.
Yeah.
Can you share your thoughts about what that would mean for millions of Americans who would be otherwise uninsured?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. You know, I have been on the campaign trail excessively, and in these last few days, I've been telling folks that this really is a campaign of the heart right now. If we were out there campaigning on the facts, I think we would have scooped up a lot more votes. But right now, with the folks who are undecided, I have been asking them to tell stories from the heart. And many of the stories that I tell have to do with the ACA. My mom was diagnosed with cancer when I was in high school, pre-ACA. My parents struggled, one, getting kicked off insurance companies because they would discover that my mom had cancer. She had a pre-existing condition. And 2, just affording chemotherapy drugs and treatments that she relied on. And, you know, we grew up in the middle class up here in northern Michigan, and my folks run a small business, and it was really hard for them to make those decisions to buy prescription drugs or to put food on the table. I would watch as my mom would count, singles in her purse and send them to me, send them with me to school for lunch money. And she'd apologize that maybe it might not be enough. The lunch lady at school was very sweet enough to kind of let me run in the red a little bit. And those were real decisions being made by families like ours. So whether or not we could afford healthcare or not. And of course, I tell the story of our son when Gus was diagnosed with RSV and when he was on a ventilator in a children's hospital. Thank goodness we had good healthcare. So the only thing we had to worry about when our son was fighting for his life is whether or not he'd get better. I think every American is under no illusion that healthcare in this country could use a lot of work, but at least folks like Kamala Harris are trying to defend it and expand it, while Donald Trump says his healthcare plan is concepts of a plan. So I think many, many families in this country are grateful for the ACA. Of course, there's still work to be done, but the ACA has saved families and saved lives, including those in my own family.
So, another issue, Justin, that I imagine hits home for you as a parent and also a career educator. There's plenty in Project 2025 that has to do with education, from dismantling the DEA, the Head Start program, federal civil rights protections for LGBTQ students. So I did take your pick. What would you like to talk about? Education.
I know. I mean, this is something I think it reminds us of how deeply unserious Donald Trump is about educating our kids and taking education seriously. You saw that in his first term with picking someone like Betsy DeVos. And certainly Project 2025's motivation to gut the Department of Education, like you said, would leave millions of kids behind, not to mention kids with disabilities who rely on fair and equitable access to public education. But also the Department of Education does more than just set federal guidelines on education. It also ensures that kids are fed. When I was teaching in Chicago public schools, I was very familiar with students coming to school who didn't have breakfast, who relied on us for lunch, and the sort of wraparound services that kids get at school. Certainly, if any family out there has a child with an IEP, you know what it would feel like to be kicked to the curb and be told you're on your own. And that's essentially what Donald Trump and Project 2025 is saying. We're not going to make sure that everyone has equal access. We're not going to make sure that students with disabilities have equal access and a fair shot in our education system in this country. Why would we care if you're hungry coming to school? Why would we care about keeping teachers and kids safe? And so, yes, as a teacher, this is the one that gets me a little hot under the collar because it's so vital and important that we take care of our kids, but we do right by them. And I don't know why Donald Trump is so hell-bent on making sure that future generations are uneducated in this country.
Chris, real quick, before you get to your question,
Sure.
I wanted to piggyback on this. Families like yours, families like mine, aren't things that kids would be able to talk about in schools under some of the proposed rules in Project 2025. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think right now in this final stretch, focusing on things like Project 2025 is really important to remind folks of the very real reality that concepts like this have for families like ours, for communities like ours. I'm grateful that there are leaders who go to Washington that are running for president right now who are focused on solving real issues for families, making sure that our parents can afford their prescription drugs, making sure that our kids are educated properly and appropriately in this country, where in Michigan especially, we're very proud of fixing the damn roads and doing right. Common sense politics that affects people's pocketbooks and issues around the kitchen table. I don't know why there are people in politics still focused on things like, not being able to say the word gay or making a teacher in this country feel as if she wouldn't be allowed to talk about her family simply for the existence of it. There are real problems that we need to solve as a country. And again, I think Project 2025 is what you see from a political party that has lost its mooring, that has no idea what it is, and is going to focus on hatred and division and scare tactics in an effort to win over people. But, I choose a politics of hope and inclusion and progress. So I'm very, very, I'm glad that we're having this conversation so we can remind folks of what we're up against. And I'm very proud to be campaigning for a candidate who gets it, who takes these things seriously.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue into my question, which is, I'd love to hear any color or details that you're interested in sharing about conversations about Project 2025 that you've had on the campaign trail, and specifically whether you think voters are making a connection between this, 900-page policy document and Donald Trump, the candidate.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see former Kamala staffers working on it, so
Sure.
you have to ask yourself, if you feel like you have no influence in the policy arena and you feel like you have nothing to do with it, then why is it all your people who are working on it? And then why are those people who are working on it bragging about you liking it? So I don't believe it, and I don't think voters are believing it as well. I have campaigned all around this country this year. Last week I was in the Upper Peninsula, Dana, as you're familiar, in pretty red areas of our state, and folks are focused on things that are going to affect their very real personal lives. We're talking about the right to join a union. We're talking about keeping our kids safe at school, the ability to afford prescription health care, whether or not a president is going to take gun violence seriously in this country, whether a president is going to take climate change seriously. And anytime Project 2025 comes up, I think we're all familiar with who the real author is here, and that would be Donald Trump.
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to remark that, I of course am not campaigning for Kamala Harris, but I've done a little bit of traveling this summer. I was in Milwaukee for the RNC and in Chicago for the DNC. And I was just struck by the number of people who are not involved in politics, folks that I'd be talking with, whether it was a server or an Uber driver, who would independently bring up Project 2025. It was very interesting to see that, how much it's connecting with people.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think people, I don't think people are under any, illusions here. And certainly the things that I'm hearing on the campaign trail are about the issues that affect our everyday lives. And then when you hear about something like Project 2025, I think people are sort of grossed out by it and shocked by it. I think it's, one of the biggest scandals of this election cycle. I'm totally going to steal this from my husband, but he says the biggest scandal they have going on right now is, not the sex scandal, although he's got that. It's not crimes, but he's got that. It's that they went out there and actually wrote their policies down. And then when people read that, they realize that Democrats have been with them on the issues and that Project 2025 is deeply removed from where the majority of American people are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Chasten, thank you so much for joining us today. We so appreciate you taking the time. Obviously, a very busy time for you.
Yes.
So thank you so much.
Thanks.
And wish you a good next 2 weeks.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
Likewise. Thanks, Chasten.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. For everyone that's tuning in, watching us on YouTube or Instagram Live or Facebook, we so appreciate you joining us. We have our next guest coming on, and I'm going to bring her to the stage. It's Charlotte Clymer.
Hey, y'all. How you doing?
Hey, Charlotte. Great to see you.
Great to see you, too. Y'all look fantastic.
Oh, well, thank
Likewise.
you.
I love your blouse.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I got it for pretty cheap.
I love a bargain shop.
That's
well,
right.
Let me do your bio here real quick.
Yeah.
So Charlotte Clymer is a writer, an activist, communications consultant, military veteran. She writes Charlotte's Web's Thoughts, a blog on politics and LGBTQ plus equality. In 2021, she signed an exclusive deal with Substack. Is that correct?
That's right.
Previously, was the director of communications and strategy at Catholics for Choice and served as press secretary for Rapid Response at the Human Rights Campaign. Charlotte, we are so thrilled to have you.
I'm so thrilled to be here. I really appreciate y'all putting this on because our community needs to know how bad Project 2025 is.
Well, let's get into that because you have hundreds of thousands of followers and you've spoken about Project 2025 with them. What have been the major concerns that they have raised about it?
It's interesting because I'd say 8-9 months ago, Project 2025 was what was keeping me up at night. But that's really no longer the case. What keeps me up at night now is the permission structure that Project 2025 would allow for the far right to go even further in their extremism. All throughout history, and especially during the period of the modern LGBTQ rights movement, whatever the far right and honestly, the bulk of the Republican Party have stated they want to do in terms of policy against LGBTQ people, in secret, they wanted to go to the right at that. I mean, this Project 2025 is bad enough, and we can talk about that, and we will. But honestly, the cruelty and suffering that can be inflicted on LGBTQ people in its second Donald Trump term, and honestly, at this point, if he were to win, I would say maybe a third and fourth term, because he's consistently talked about not being removed from office, keeping his tenure going in office. Really, the cruelty and suffering that can be inflicted is only limited by the imagination. It truly is. It's about as bad as you can imagine it will be. And so what I want folks to understand is that even as we read all these horrifying things that the Heritage Foundation has been very open about wanting to do, it goes way beyond that. I'm talking about LGBTQ people being rounded up. The fact that, Donald Trump already said that he wants to do a mass operation to round up and deport, 11 million undocumented migrants in this country.
Mhm.
He's not going to stop there. He's going to go after us. He's going to go after any non-LGBTQ woman who wants access to reproductive health, to abortion access. He's going to go after communities of color for protesting police brutality and systemic racism. I mean, it really is only limited by the imagination.
So, Charlotte, I think that presents also an interesting corollary. You referenced kind of the permission structure for kind of worse things than are directly outlined in the document itself. The document itself also, while it makes no bones about, for example, its position on things like gender affirming care, it also uses very ambiguous language about trans folks. And, for example, and I mentioned this earlier, but the conflation of transgender identities with something like pornography. I'd love to get your thoughts on that, the way that the vagueness of the language perhaps would enable this kind of thing.
Yeah, I often like to refer to Project 2025 as Project 1933. And what we saw during the Third Reich, and honestly the lead up to the Third Reich, was that the Nazi Party in Germany would first dehumanize groups in the public imagination. And then once we were dehumanized, and LGBTQ people were part of those who were dehumanized, once we were dehumanized, they would implement laws that were basically took advantage of that permission structure that they put in through that dehumanizing propaganda. I have a quote right here. That's the one you just referenced. Project 2025 wrote, "Children suffer the toxic normalization of transgenderism, with drag queens and pornography invading their school libraries." Pornography, manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children, for instance, is not a political Gordian knot inextricably binding up disparate claims about free speech, property rights, sexual liberation, and child welfare. Now, look, we all know that trans people are hypersexualized in our current cultural framework. We know that anything a trans person does is often seen, regardless of what it is, going to check out a book, having a job, having kids. It's always filtered through that prism of hypersexualization. We are a canvas for all of the sexual, I would say, repression, fear, and propaganda that swirls around in these Christian nationalist movements, and they just project it on us. So, that vague language that you referenced can easily be weaponized into more tangible laws that horrifically oppress trans people.
Mm-hmm.
And Charlotte, I'm curious, I know I asked you earlier about your followers talking with you about this. What have you been hearing from your trans followers, your non-binary followers?
I think that the vast majority of trans people understand the stakes that are present, regardless of where we may fall on the political spectrum. Trans people have been getting the constant message for the past decade, Wow, a lot of allergies here in DC. I apologize.
It's okay.
We've been getting, the same propaganda for the past decade, ever since Donald Trump started running for president. It's been insidious at first, a little more under the radar, and then it comes out more and more. And it's reached a fever pitch over the last 2 months, especially in political advertisements. Anyone who has watched an NFL football game or a college football game has seen these deluge of anti-trans ads. And so I think trans people as a community, we get what's coming if Trump were elected.
Mhm.
What I worry about are non-trans people, especially those who have trans folks who are friends and relatives, who are in this very, very counterproductive mindset where they think, well, sure, they say bad things, but would they really do that? Would they have the guts to be so cruel and visceral in their policy? And y'all, I got to tell you, they absolutely will. They absolutely will. We should take them at their word.
So, a related question, Charlotte, like I'm imagining if you're a young person, if you're a young voter, right? If you're a young trans person, it's especially difficult to be seeing the things that you're describing, the ads and so on. If you're an LGBTQ person, a young person, a voter, it's difficult. If you're an ally, it's difficult. What is your message to those young folks who may have a hard time emotionally with this and may feel disillusioned and might want to say, you know what, forget all of this. I'm not going to be involved in politics.
I'll be honest with you. I think that's a wonderful, empathetic question, and I think I'm glad you asked it. I wouldn't say a damn thing to them.
Yeah.
Not a thing. Yeah, they don't need to hear from me. What I would say is that non-trans folks in their lives need to be reaching out to trans people in their lives and asking them, "Are you okay?" Checking in on them. I've had several friends text me this week saying, "Hey, I hope you're not watching TV too much, or whatever, because of all these anti-trans ads that are on the air." We need more of that. We need more of that community solidarity. Whenever I see a news story of non-trans gay men or lesbians or bisexual people who are assaulted or discriminated against, I'll check in on my friends who are not trans but gay, lesbian, bisexual to make sure they're doing okay. We need a community solidarity right now. That's the only thing that's going to get us through this. I don't think that any one person should go through this alone, should hold these feelings inside, try to power through. There's no powering through this. And we need to really be reaching out to each other and ensure we have each other's backs.
Charlotte, I know that you served, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Trans service members have had their careers at the center of a lot of back and forth, from being allowed to serve, from not being allowed to serve, to being allowed to serve again. Project 2025 would once again reverse that, saying, quote, "Gender dysphoria is incompatible with the demands of military service, and the use of public monies for transgender surgeries for service members should be ended." What's the real fear of letting trans people who want to serve their country serve?
Oh gosh, I could talk about this for half an hour, but I'll
You've
try to
got
keep it
5
short.
minutes.
Yes, we have 5 minutes. I'll try to keep it short. First of all, it would be done very easily. I just want to be very clear about that. Within an hour of Donald Trump taking the oath of office, all he has to do is sign an executive order to ban trans people from military service, and it's done. The military will have to go through the process of, kicking folks out, but it would be done within an hour of him taking the oath of office. The other thing too is that Don't Ask, Don't Tell could easily be reinstated. It wasn't the Supreme Court who decided on Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It was a congressional act that repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, permitting non-trans, gay, lesbian, and bisexual people to serve in the military. All Congress has to do is pass a bill re-banning LGBTQ people from the military, and it's done. So why is this important? Military service throughout our long history has been an entree to more cruel things. We saw it with the fact that men of color were banned from military service early in our country's history. Women were banned from service at one point. Of course, gay, lesbian, and bisexual folks who are not transgender were banned. Trans people were banned. The right uses bans like this to justify other bans. Bans against LGBTQ people in employment, Bostock. bans against LGBTQ people's protection from discrimination in healthcare and housing, in credit, in public accommodations. Regardless of how you feel about the military, and I'm very proud of my service, but I understand there's some LGBTQ people who have uneasy feelings about it. Fine. But I'm telling you, what they do is they use military service as justification for the rest of their agenda. Because once you say that it's okay to disrespect LGBTQ service members, it becomes much easier to discriminate and violently oppress LGBTQ people in every other sector of public life. So that is the critical linchpin here. Military service isn't just about service members and military families. It's about the entire community and the way they give permission to oppress all of us.
Well, that's very interesting way to put it. I admit I'm a little embarrassed. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Nor did I. Yeah, absolutely. I love your historical perspective on many of these questions, Charlotte. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Charlotte, do you have anything that you're just itching to get off your chest about Project 2025 before we lose you?
Yeah, I'm going to be blunt for a second. And I don't mean for this to come across as harsh or as an attack on anyone. I know that there are LGBTQ people who are very wary of voting for Vice President Harris and Governor Walz for any number of reasons. Maybe it's certain policies, maybe it's Gaza, whatever. Whatever issue you care about, every progressive issue, every progressive cause, everything you hold dear will be magnitudes worse under Trump than it would under any other presidential administration. Voting for Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, and I'm proud to do so, should not be about loving the candidate. It should be about stopping Trump from coming in and inflicting horror on the people that we love, on our community. This is not about who you love. It's about making a smart decision for survival. It's about putting the community ahead of everything else. That's why we have to support Vice President Harris and Governor Walz and make sure we stop Trump at the ballot box.
Thank you so much for being here, Charlotte. We so appreciate it. No, you're a busy person and working hard. As I said to Justin, good luck in these next 2 weeks. I know it's going to be a lot for everybody, but we so appreciate you being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Y'all are amazing. Thanks for putting this on today. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Take care.
Bye.
All right. I am just going to, sorry, technical difficulties. We just need to, there we go. So I couldn't see Representative Julie Johnson, who we are going to bring up here. Hello, Representative.
Hello.
Thank
How are
you
you?
so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Well, give me a moment here. I'm going to give a little bio. We've got a great bio for you. So Representative Julie Johnson was first elected to the Texas House in 2018 and is now serving your third term for District 115, which includes cities like Addison, Carrollton, and Dallas. And she serves on the House Committees for Insurance and Judiciary and Civil Jurisprudence, where she is vice chair. Known for her work on healthcare access and consumer protection, she was named 2019's Freshman of the Year by Texas Monthly and has earned awards from Texas Medical Association and Texas CASA. You're currently running for Congress in Texas, and she is part of several House caucuses, including serving as vice chair of the Women's Health Caucus and treasurer of the Texas LGBTQ Caucus. I don't know how you have the time, but back at home, you're also an attorney specializing in personal injury, family law, and mediation. Welcome, Representative Johnson.
Thank you so very much.
We're
How
so
dare
glad
you
you're
have
here.
me follow Charlotte, though? Come on. now.
Nobody wants to follow Charlotte. I know,
I mean,
right?
come on.
She's so great. Well, we want to thank you because we know we are taking you away from knocking on doors and actively campaigning. So we so appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. The conversation's important. We have to engage our community to vote.
But we're so happy to have you, Representative Johnson. Thanks so much for joining us. Should we jump in with questions, Dana?
Yes, let's go for it.
Fabulous. So I would love to hear your thoughts about reproductive rights and healthcare more broadly. Something that, of course, the state of Texas has a lot of recent experience with over the past few years. Tying it to Project 2025, is there anything that you're concerned about with respect to the potential of this blueprint to further limit access to healthcare among LGBTQ folks, women, et cetera?
Oh, absolutely. Well, we've seen kind of the beginnings of that here in Texas. Texas is the first state in the union to pass a very oppressive abortion ban, really restricting women's rights to abortion care and health care. And it has had devastating consequences here. Women have to be on the brink of death before they can get actually any care. And I think under Project 2025, they removed that exceptions for the life of the mother. So if you have a complication with pregnancy under Project 2025, you're just dead, because your life as a living person is not more important in their view than the life of an unborn child. And I think that has really catastrophic consequences. We see the abortion discussion and the consequences of that really playing out in our state Senate race between Colin Allred and Ted Cruz. It's a key issue that's been discussed. We've had many women that have come forward and have had really substantial consequences of their own personal health due to pregnancy complications. And then not to mention the fact that, we have over 28,000 women have been forced to carry to term their rapist babies. And there's no exception of rape and incest. And so a daughter that has been, raped by their father is now having to carry their sibling. And that is just morally wrong to me. And I think we can see that going even further. And Project 2025 really wants to take women back. And they really want to remove any access to birth control, to abortion care, to all of it. And then I think we see that also translate over into LGBTQ healthcare,
Right.
Especially with respect to trans healthcare. We've also seen that we have a trans health ban. Now, if you're under the age of 18, you're not allowed to have any health care here in Texas. Again, it starts here and it kind of spreads throughout the country. And now what they're wanting to do in the upcoming legislative session is extend that ban to 18 to 26. And what Project 2025 wants to do is just extend it permanently to anyone, just really prohibit any kind of access to health care for the trans community. And that's so vital. And also just LGBTQ health all around. And so they're trying to make it very hard for us to be us.
Is this something, and forgive me, I actually don't know the answer to this, and you all may not either, but I'm curious whether Project 2025 also addresses preventative HIV treatments like PrEP, things like that. Do you happen to know?
I don't know specifically, but it wouldn't surprise me if they extended it to that. They try to do everything they can to restrict HIV, anything to do with our community. They want our community to die. They don't want our community to live and survive these diseases. And they want us to restrict our ability to have full, healthy lives. So, yes, it wouldn't surprise me at all if HIV PrEP was on the chopping block as well.
And now, Chris, I've spent a lot of time into Project 2025, a lot of time. I don't recall seeing anything about it. I could be wrong, but in my research about the LGBTQ community and everything, I did not see it come up.
Okay, forgive me. It's something that just occurred to me because I know this is something that Texas has also dealt with Matthew Kosmarek, the judge of the Northern District Court, and trying to prevent access to PrEP medications, and really trying to prevent insurers from covering it. Was
right, and restricting Medicare, Medicaid, health insurance access, which essentially eliminates access.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, Texas, massive state, but not a monolith. Such a diverse citizenry of the state. What have your constituents been sharing with you about their concerns about Project 2025?
Well, I think very concerned of the destruction of our democratic values, very concerned over the constitutional principles of freedom and separation of church and state and protection of the free press and, all the things that we care about constitutionally that we hear about. And so I think just a complete destruction of anything that is not white Christian nationalism. And if you don't fit in that box, then you're not welcome in the Project 2025's governmental space. And so I think, and that can kind of really transcend itself through so many other things. If it's taking women 18 steps back, I was so disturbed, Yesterday, I saw on Facebook or Instagram, one of those, a student at Texas A&M having a sign that says, reverse the 19th Amendment.
Yeah.
Women's right to vote. And it was like, what on earth? You know, why are we having a young white male college student advocating for women to lose their right to vote? And, you know, and that stuff percolate. Where did he get that from? You know, and where do those notions, where do those seeds get planted from? And because then they take on a life of their own. And that's exactly kind of what's happened with trans healthcare. You know, that really kind of got started because a father got mad that he lost a custody case here in Dallas, and he started protesting and lobbying the Texas legislature. And then it just kind of had this wave of Republican talking points against our community that if they push removal of trans healthcare, that they can score some political points. And so, you know, I think that there's just a lot to be concerned about. And what I'm seeing, and you're right, I'm out knocking doors. I knocked a bunch of doors today. I'm out talking to folks, and people are very concerned about the health of our democracy and what does this country stand for. And, you know, I have neighbors that come by my house all the time. I mean, it's very clear I'm a Democrat, and they come by wanting therapy almost. It's like part politician.
You've got to comfort them.
Like, we're with you. What can we do? My God, what is happening? And, you know, they just want me to reassure them that there's folks like us in elected office that are trying really hard to be normal, to value our constitutional principles, to respect each one of us and recognize we all have our dignity and equality and fight for these values. But people are very scared. They're very nervous, and the anxiety level, I think, is off the chain.
So, Representative Johnson, another issue that's really politically salient, especially in this election and in Texas, and it's also a big part of Project 2025, immigration. So I'm curious, you know, at one point, Donald Trump proposed a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers, and that's something that would not be available under Project 2025. Curious to hear your thoughts about that, as well as any conversations you may have had about with voters about this matter. Right.
Well, obviously, a pathway to citizenship for DACA Dreamers is a fundamental principle here in Texas. It's very critical. We have a lot of folks that fall within that category. And these are folks that have been here in the state and in this country since they're very young children and have grown up here, been to school here, work here. They deserve every right to have an opportunity for citizenship. And we really do need to correct that. And I think there's a lot of concern about the Project 2025's mass deportation agenda, you know, and ending birthright citizenship. I mean, that needs to just sound the alarm bells for everyone here. You know, we have a longstanding principle. If you're born in this country, you're a citizen of this country. Right. And to start taking that apart and analyzing your history of how you got here and determining whether or not you're worthy of citizenship should scare the hell out of everybody. And then also, it is just completely unpractical and inhumane to just say we're going to go mass deport 12 million people. And, you know, it's interesting, and because it all brings down to personal relations. I had these constituents one time, very conservative Republicans, and they came to me really about some education policy, but on the side, they asked me about immigration. And, you know, and this was their quote, you know, I was against all these immigrants until, you know what, they came and arrested my yard man. And my yard man is a great guy. Why would they arrest my yard man? You know, and I was just dumbfounded about how ignorant they were that, you know, that everyone else is bad, but their yard man's okay. And it just really kind of highlighted the insanity of this argument and how people sometimes have to personalize it to themselves to realize the inequities and just how wrong it is. But I think this mass deportation of any immigrant in this country needs to send shivers down all of our spines. And it really reeks of just exactly kind of what Charlotte was alluding to, just pre-Hitler Germany of ethnic cleansing and what was going on there. And that's exactly what they're trying to do here.
And it opens up a lot of questions also. What about LGBT asylum seekers coming from all over the world?
Oh, I would expect that that is not high on the Project 2025's list of people to let in. I'm thinking that if you're an LGBT person of color from another country, you are low on their admission to our country list under the Project 2025 regime. So, I just don't see how any LGBTQ person in good conscience could vote for Trump and everything that they stand for and the other side. People need to vote on the Democratic ticket for every Democrat running. It's not just at the top of the ticket. We have great people running up and down the ballot in all of these states, and they need everyone's support. Ballot drop-off is one of the biggest problems that we see, and because state policies and county policies and city policies and school board policies really matter as well. And so, we just really need people to be engaged in voting like they've never been voting before, and like their life depends on it, because I think at this point it really does.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, do you have anything else you wanted to ask Rep. Johnson?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for your thoughtful answers. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I look forward to representing our community in Congress and being the first LGBT person ever elected to Congress from the state of Texas. So I'm excited about that.
Rep. Johnson, I have one question before you leave. We
Yeah.
have a lot of Gen Z voters voting for the first time ever this election. What would you like to share with them? What do you want them to know as they head to the ballot box?
What I would tell you, if you're trying to decide whether or not to vote and whether or not to participate in our democracy, is this: you have power. You have power to elect people that have your values and that will fight for your values and fight for your right to exist in your full state. Why in the world would you give your power over to somebody else? Why would you cede that at the ballot box? Don't ever yield your power in life to anyone. Claim who you are. Take care of yourself. You would never just turn your money over to strangers. Why are you turning your vote over to people who don't care about you? Vote. Be part of the process.
Thank you so much. Good luck knocking on those doors.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Take care. All right. Just give me a moment here because there I can scroll finally. I wasn't able to scroll, so Chris, I couldn't see who was coming up next.
We're working this out.
Thanks again to everyone who is, we're heading into almost near our second hour here, talking about Project 2025. So thanks everyone who is watching us on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram. We so appreciate it. All right. So we have our next guest coming up. I hope you're ready. Rep. Kenyatta, are you all right? You good? All right, good. We're going to bring him on.
Hi, everybody.
It's Rep. Malcolm Kenyatta out of Philadelphia. Thanks so much for being here.
So happy to be with you, Dana. Chris, great to see you, and good to not see, but to be with everybody watching.
Thank you. Do you mind if Chris gives a little bio on you so everyone knows who you are?
Please, and Chris, feel free to embellish. Okay, go ahead.
Sounds good. Representative Kenyatta, I just wrote about your race, as a matter of fact. I'll just send you my story. I just went out today.
Oh, I can't wait. Okay, good.
Yeah. So Representative Malcolm Kenyatta is from North Philadelphia, and what I just heard described recently as the swingiest of the 7 swing states in Pennsylvania. He serves in the Pennsylvania General Assembly, holding degrees from Temple and Drexel, and completed the Harvard Kennedy School's Executives in State and Local Government program. A champion of voting rights, worker protections, and gun safety, Kenyatta holds multiple leadership roles in the legislature and serves on key committees. In 2018, he became the first openly LGBTQ plus person of color in the Pennsylvania General Assembly, and made history again with his 2024 Democratic nomination for the role of Auditor General. Kenyatta's career has been featured in 2 documentaries, and he was recently, I think this year, right, appointed to the Presidential Commission Presidential Advisory Commission.
Yeah, I'm chairing the Presidential Advisory Commission on really long name, but on advancing educational equity, excellence, and economic opportunity for Black Americans.
Thank you so much for the assist. Yep.
That's fantastic.
So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Dana to get us started with questions.
All right. So, Representative, you represent you represent Pennsylvania, and you have a lot of eyes on your state right now. Philadelphia, in particular, is the home to one of the most robust LGBTQ communities in the country. What have your constituents been saying about Project 2025, and what are their concerns?
Yeah, so Dana, you hit the nail on the head, and Chris as well. Pennsylvania is the center of the political universe, as I like to say, in this and every election. And so, no pressure, but a lot of pressure. We feel it every single day, and a part of the reason we feel it so viscerally is because this is a place that has birthed big ideas,
Right.
a place where we certainly not only understand what our nation's values are, being the birthplace of them, but a place where I think we take it a little bit personal on protecting and preserving and expanding the freedoms that too often I think there are folks who take it for granted, certainly not within our community. We don't take it for granted. And we know all too well the fights that we have on our hands right now in a divided legislature here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We're the only divided legislature in the country. And so we are in a position where we have advanced, we finally, because we took control of the House by just one seat, we've been in a position in the House to, for the first time in a long time, to advance good legislation instead of just being in a defensive crouch. And what Project 2025 would do is put us in a position where every single day we are in a defensive crouch, because what it would seek to do, and I know you've been talking about it for 2 hours, but what it would seek to do is to undermine all of the basic protections that every single American deserves to have access to. The basic idea that you can be treated with dignity and respect, that no matter who you are, that you can marry the person that you love, that you can have that union respected by the government, that you can then get married on Friday and show up to work on Monday with a picture of your spouse on your desk and not be fired from your job or kicked out of your accommodations. All of these different things are on the line. And as we enter the final stretch of this campaign, we have certainly been inundated with a lot of the messages that people are seeing nationally, trying to target our trans siblings, particularly trans kids. And I would tell you, it pisses me off that you have grown ass adults who want to make their political bones by picking on children. It is sick stuff.
Representative Kenyatta, your campaign has been really fantastic in Pennsylvania for Auditor General. I've heard a lot of folks say that they are expecting the enthusiasm for your campaign to have some upticket benefits for other folks running Bob Casey and Kamala Harris. I'm curious if you've given any thought to whether and how Project 2025, if it's implemented, would impact your work as Auditor General.
Yeah, that is a really solid question. Thank you for that. So let me say this. I think, the energy that you're seeing in our race, frankly, is because of so many people all across the Commonwealth who aren't just saying, like, look at Malcolm and how great he is, but what we've done in our campaign. And frankly, it started with my former colleague, Representative Sims, the first openly LGBTQ person to be in the General Assembly in Pennsylvania. And I followed behind him a couple of years later. And now we're in a position, get this, where there are 8 openly LGBTQ people in the General Assembly. That is something I could have not imagined just, 6 years ago when I came into the House. And I would never forget, one of my colleagues said to me, I ran because I saw you run. And it made me know that, it's possible. And so that's the power of representation. It's never about one person being the be all end all. I always get so frustrated when I have to say, I'm the first this or the first that. I want to be in a position, in a place where it is so common for members of our community to run and win that it's like wallpaper. But what I also understand is that when we do run and when we do win, when you know what it's like to be treated unfairly simply for being who you are, you fight different, you organize different, and you know what's at stake in a much different way. And as it relates to Project 2025, I certainly can think about all the different ways that it's at stake. The Auditor General does 2 basic things. A, make sure taxpayer dollars aren't being utilized in an illegal way or aren't being stolen, but then to ask the tough questions of, well, what the hell do we do with your money? What did you get for your tax dollars that were spent? And we're in a position right now, just take one instance. I have talked about rebuilding the Bureau of School Audits. The current MAGA Republican Auditor General, who wants to dismantle public education as we know it, stopped auditing our public schools because he didn't want to audit charter schools. So he said, I'll just audit no schools. And so if Donald Trump has his way, for example, and dismantles the Department of Education, Title I funding, which goes to the poorest schools across the most under-resourced schools and school districts across our Commonwealth and across our country, that would be devastating for so many classrooms and for so many families and for so many young people who are already suffering from learning loss, who already don't have the resources that they deserve. And so when I go in to measure the quality of the educational instruction that they're getting, measure the outcomes in those buildings, deal with the fact that so many schools have lead, asbestos, and mold, we're going to be walking into a situation where I'm only going to have bad news to deliver. And I think that we need to be in a situation where we are elevating the value of public school education and investing in our teachers, investing in our young people.
I'd like to ask you about another element of Project 2025 that concerns doing away with diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Of course, this is kind of on the heels of the war against DEI that we've seen in a lot of conservative circles. Just curious to get your thoughts about that, especially because, as I understand it, like public policy often is informed by things like DEI, where you look at where there are areas where additional investment is needed. And so to completely do away with that, I would imagine would have implications just across the board with respect to a lot of the work that you'd be engaged in as Auditor General as well.
Yeah, you know what? This is like, let's just take a step back. Organizations, any organization, doesn't matter, government, business, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
When you have people who look at a problem from a variety of different ways, you are better able to actually solve the big complex problems that we have in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
We are never going to experience in America the fullness of the American promise if we don't have the fullness of the American experience represented at every single level of government. And so, in this race, I say to people, highlight the fact that I'm the first openly LGBTQ person ever nominated statewide in Pennsylvania.
Right.
And so many people, want to highlight that and talk about it. And I say to people, I'm not running because of the distinctions that I hold, but I certainly don't leave them at home. I walk into every room understanding that people who grew up in neighborhoods like mine and working poor families like mine I needed CHIP. That was the only way I had healthcare. Some people who are watching right now know about that. I knew what it meant to grow up and be in that grocery store with my mom, filling up that cart with great hopes and expectations until you get to the register and stuff starts going up and up and up and you start having to take things out of the cart. I knew what it means, and I know what it means, and all of you know what it means to hold your breath when the Supreme Court is deciding one of our fundamental rights yet again. When you have that feeling, when you have that experience, you walk into every room with a different vantage point that is necessary to put America in a position where we always have that competitive advantage. That is what makes us great. Donald Trump believes that this is a crappy country and that it's crappy because you have a neighbor who doesn't have a family that looks like yours or who doesn't look like you. We're in a moment where we need to turn to each other, not turn on each other. And Project 2025 is a blueprint for us to turn on the most marginalized people in our communities as if that is going to solve our problems. Bullying little kids, breaking up happy, loving LGBTQ families is not going to do a damn thing to continue to tackle inflation. It's not going to do a damn thing to open more small businesses in our community. It's not going to do a damn thing to make it less likely that people get shot in their classroom. We need serious people, and Project 2025 is not a serious vision. It's just a vision to give more power and authority to a small group of closed-minded bigots who want to decide what happens in every single person's life, and that is not the small government conservatism that I grew up learning about.
I'm looking at backstage, and Mark Siegel, famed activist and advocate and publisher and founder of the Philadelphia Gay News, is backstage with us right now. And always an inspiration to me, somebody I look up to a lot. And he speaks incredibly highly of you. I've been hearing about you for years. And it has me thinking of all the work that we have done, that the Mark Siegels of the world have done, that our parents have done, and we have done to get to where we are, just to feel like it's all being pushed back. And in some ways, talking with you brought this to my mind. It feels like you're being erased, like Project 2025, erasing diversity and inclusion, erasing trans lives and healthcare, erasing LGBTQ families and being able to talk about who you are and your in your life with your, you know, friends and families and students and coworkers. It all just feels, I think it can feel hopeless. What would you say to people who are feeling that way? I think it can be frustrating. I mean, I'm a journalist and Chris is a journalist. And I'm sure that we get frustrated a lot about this.
You know what? They cannot erase us. We can never be erased. And I would say to folks who feel alone, who feel desperate, who feel angry, who feel hopeless for the future, you are not alone. There is a future that is bright, and I know it because we're going to fight for it. You know, I had an opportunity to speak at the Democratic National Convention. I brought out that huge Project 2025 book and talked about some of the things that were
yes.
But at the end of my remarks, I told a little story that I've told many times about my grandmother, who was she was an absolute warrior in the civil rights movement. And I'll never forget her calling me. We're debating a bill on the House floor. And my grandmother, for whatever reason, watches PCN and C-SPAN and all these things. Okay, sometimes you ask who's watching. Mary Kenyatta is watching in South Carolina. Okay, she is watching. And she called me after the debate, and I could hear that she, you know, sounded like she was crying. And I'm like, oh my God, like, what is wrong? And she just said, you know, baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry because I thought we had fixed some of this stuff. And here you are fighting the same fights that I thought we had won. And I said to her what I say to everybody: it is just our turn. It is our turn to stand up in the very way that Mark stood up and continues to stand up. It is our turn in the way that so many of our ancestors moved the needle because they understood that America is big enough for all of us,
Right.
that not only do we deserve to be here, we are not going anywhere. We are not going to cede the promise and the prosperity of this nation to people who want to divide us up, to diminish our contributions, and to try to devalue and dismantle our families. We are not going to let it happen. And so when you ask what we do what we've always done. We pull our shoulders back, we put our head up, we look straight in the eye of all of the challenges, all of the bigots, and we say it's our turn, and we are ready to beat you and to resist and to win, as our community always has. That's all we know how to do, and it's what we're going to do. And if we do it right, Chris, if we do it right, Dana, the next generation of young people are going to grow up in a world where they'll have their own set of challenges, but there will be so many things that we are debating that they don't even know what the hell we're talking about, because we have put ourselves in a position where we have advanced the ball. You know, there are kids growing up right now who don't know anything about not being able to marry the person you love. Right. They don't know anything about it because of the work that so many people have done. And we're going to do that work now. It's our opportunity to do it. And we're going to win. In 12 days, hear me, we are going to win.
I would just go quickly add that a lot of young LGBTQ folks looking up now to the Pennsylvania State Assembly and seeing eight people representing them, just something that maybe was unfathomable even 6 years ago, as you said. So just beautifully put.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm fired up now, Representative Kenyatta. I'm ready to go. Let's go.
I'm ready to go. Let's go win. And I'm so excited I get to hear my good friend Mark Siegel next, I think.
Oh, he's kind of just backing us up, but he's back there.
Well, hi, Mark. I love you, my friend.
And good luck in the next 2 weeks. It's
Well, when I talk to you next, we will have made some big history here.
Yes, I hope so.
Across the country. But I'm looking forward to it. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And let's go win an election.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Whew. Yes. All right. Thank you so much. Tuning in. We are now at the hour mark. Appreciate everyone for watching. And we are going to bring on another guest. Okay, we're bringing on Janelle. Janelle, are you ready? All right, not in the head. All right. Thank you so much for being here, Janelle.
Hi, how are you?
Love the
Thank you.
glasses.
Oh, thanks. My wife picked them out. Thank you. It's always a hit when she picks them out. When I pick them out, it's like, no, you look weird.
Well, let me give a little bio on you for the folks tuning in.
Please.
Janelle Perez is the executive director of LPAC, an organization focused on building political strength and increasing representation for LGBTQ plus women and non-binary candidates. She's the daughter of Cuban exiles and a small business owner who began her career on Capitol Hill after graduating from Florida International University. And while pursuing her master's at Johns Hopkins, Janelle worked for a nonprofit advocating for federal funding to fight global diseases. After being diagnosed with stage 4 cancer at 28, she moved to Miami to focus on her health and family, and she was the 2022 Democratic nominee for Florida State Representative. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, Senate. My apologies. Florida State Senate District 38. Welcome, Janelle. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. And Florida Representative, Senate, and being a Democrat both mean nothing, unfortunately.
How do you mean?
Meaning there's a supermajority here. So you can be a representative or a senator, but if you're a Democrat, it's just you're a non-existent voice, unfortunately.
It's tough. But in Florida, as I understand it, there are several candidates who are running potentially history-making races. A trans woman who might be the first trans person elected to the state legislature. And I'd love to hear about your experiences working with LGBTQ candidates on the campaign trail.
Oh, it's been absolutely incredible. And yes, you're talking about Ashley Brundage, who is one of our LPAC endorsed candidates. As you mentioned, we are the only organization nationally, LGBTQ national organization that's dedicated just to endorsing lesbian, queer, transgender, non-binary folks to every level of office in all 50 states. So yes, Ashley is one of us, and hopefully will be making history in November. And my experience being at LPAC has been incredible. We were founded in 2012, and back then by Urvashi Vaught and a couple of
others. Yes.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
A total legend, a hero.
Absolutely. And we have just launched the Urvashi Vaught Legacy Fund. So
excellent.
Look at it if you really admire Urvashi and her work. But back then in 2012, LPAC endorsed allies, we endorsed men, we had so many other folks that were endorsed under our PAC. Fast forward, 14 years later, and we have endorsed over 200 queer women and non-binary folks only. So, and our win rate stands at 83%.
Wow,
so,
that's fantastic.
Exactly. So you want to talk about, not only is our win rate high, but you want to talk about a win rate as well, and something that's absolutely incredible, and seeing the changes that we're seeing within our LGBTQ community, where just 12 years ago, there was not enough of us to endorse, that we had to endorse allies and friends and men and everyone. And here we are just with, over 200 candidates this cycle alone. It has been incredible, and it's been a great journey. And I love talking to all of these people that are running right now and hearing about the things happening in their communities and how we are stepping up literally to run for our lives.
So, not to bring the mood down, but I did want to ask you about the experiences of your candidates on the campaign trail with respect to Project 2025. If this is something that they are talking about often with voters, and what those conversations have been like.
So, I mean, Project 2025 is absolutely dangerous. It's an extreme agenda that, despite what everyone on the Republican side, is led by Trump and his loyalists, and they are threatening the rights and freedom of everyone who isn't white, Christian, wealthy, straight, or a cisgender man. This is, I have not had one-on-one conversations with our candidates in specific about, Project 2025 happening at their doorsteps, but that doesn't take away from the fact that this is an agenda that is going to impact our community tremendously in so many, disastrous ways.
Right.
So yeah, that is, I don't have any specifics, but I do want to highlight that we earlier this cycle, as part of our initiative to talk to younger voters, younger millennial voters, we collaborated with a podcast called Made It Out, and we did a voter education series. And one of our episodes, which I encourage you all to listen to, is with Congresswoman Becca Bailett, where she specifically dives into Project 2025 and what kind of impact it would have for our community, and just what her experience has been so far being in Congress and talking to the other side of the aisle about Project 2025.
Thank you. That sounds fantastic. I would absolutely love to tune into that. And likewise, I was thinking as well, like it must be difficult to run at a time when there's this 900 plus page policy blueprint that attacks folks based on multiple intersecting identities, which I'm sure applies to many of the candidates that you're working with. Going after women, people of color, and LGBTQ people as well.
Yes, I mean, first of all, I mean, we know the impacts. I'm a mother. Not only did I have to go through IVF because I'm a cancer survivor, or because I'm a lesbian woman, but I'm also a cancer survivor that had no choice.
Right.
And we know that Project 2025, if these policies are implemented, this is going to impact IVF for so many people within our community. And you're talking about this project or this group that seems to care so much about family, but it is absolutely not pro-family. So it's definitely something that, yes, it is impacting our LGBTQ community, but it is impacting everyone.
Right.
LPAC's values include a focus on LGBTQ plus rights, social justice, women's equality. All those things are massive targets of Project 2025. After so many years of progress, I mean, I think last year we had more LGBT candidates than we've ever seen before. We had just incredible progress in the last 10 years for LGBT rights. This feels like a massive step backwards. And we spoke a little bit, going back to what we were speaking about with Representative Kenyatta.
Mm-hmm.
How are you and the candidates you endorse getting the message out to voters who may not even realize that they could be voting against their own best interests?
Well, I think when we talk to voters directly and we offer them, I have always been, as a former candidate and someone now who's guiding candidates with messaging, I think acknowledging and talking about and educating folks on Project 2025, but also being able to offer them hope and an alternative to what this is the best route to go. And it's something that I've always encouraged. We're seeing it with the vice president right now. Like, she is absolutely acknowledging all the horrible things that Project 2025 and a Trump presidency can look like, but she's also offering us hope. And she's offering us her pathway on how she's going to protect these values and these principles that are so dear to every single one of us. And I think that is probably one of the best examples that I could give on how we as LPAC, in guiding our candidates, are always going to lead with. The other side is always leading with fear and fear mongering, and they always need a boogeyman. And unfortunately, more often than not, it is the LGBTQ community that is that boogeyman. But if we, despite whether you are a cisgender candidate, if you are an LGBTQ candidate, whether you're a straight candidate, whatever kind of candidate you are, when you offer those folks at the door or on the other side of the phone hope and a positive outlook on what can happen if they vote for you, you're going to get them. I think that always wins over fear.
Oh, I think you froze for a second. Oh, you're back. So Janelle, this is. Oh, I'm sorry, Dana. Do you want to go?
No, you're fine. You go for it.
So this conversation that I've had before with the folks at the Victory Fund about how, and I think a lot of people may not know this, that relative to the general population, the proportion of elected officials who are LGBTQ is quite small, and there is a need for many more people to run for office. Wanted to hear your perspective on that.
Well, for the first time, actually, no, it's not for the first time, because I feel like we've had a lot of first times, but I am so excited that this election cycle, there is a huge possibility that LPAC will be expanding our bench in Congress. As of right now, we have Congresswoman Becca Balint, Sharice Davis, Angie Craig, and Senator Tammy Baldwin. We are looking at adding the first LGBTQ Latina in Emily Randall out of Washington State. You just had her on a few minutes ago, but future Congresswoman Rep. Julie Johnson, who is another LPAC endorsed candidate. And then we've got Sarah McBride, who is going to be breaking so many glass ceilings and so many, is going to be just such an incredible member of Congress and someone who, and a voice that we so desperately need right now as a country. So I think it is amazing. I think it's telling to the time. It's telling to the trajectory of history. We've got 200 candidates this year. I can only imagine what is going to happen next. And we work really closely with Victory Fund and HRC and all of our other partners. And we share this information. That is how we are able to endorse so many people and find so many people. So I think at the end of the day, we're going to just see our numbers continue to grow. And little by little, this year we're adding 3. That's amazing. And let's not get it twisted for a minute either. We have some major protections that we need to do especially with Senator Tammy Baldwin. So that is actually what keeps me up at night right now. So there's a lot of work to be done, but we've accomplished so much, and that cannot go unnoticed and not acknowledged, because I think, as the representative that spoke right before me said, when other younger generations see people that look like us running for these positions, they feel more inclined to run for office. I am never going to forget that when I lost in 2022, the room was filled with so many young folks that were getting involved in politics for the first time ever, and they were in tears. But I saw them come around this election cycle. They're the same folks that are still knocking on doors for the same organizations. It might not be another LGBTQ candidate, but they are still politically engaged. They are still active in the party here in Florida. They're still getting the work done. And that is still really encouraging to me, who's still in the fight, because I'm seeing these young folks and seeing that bench, especially here in Florida, that is so non-existent, is starting to really fill up. And it's filling up with folks that are getting involved younger and younger. And kids were in high school and still couldn't even vote, but they were out knocking on doors for me. So I think that's really encouraging. And I think we're making tremendous progress. And hopefully with a Harris-Walz victory in November, this is just going to be a catalyst to double what we have in the next, 10 years.
Well, hopefully we'll see a Gen Z wave in the next coming elections here.
I hope so. We had Maxwell Frost in Florida, and I was so excited that we had somebody like that come out of Florida. So it can happen. It can happen from these really rare states that you don't think happen. Gabby Salinas in Tennessee. We never thought she would be somebody who would make it into the legislature, but here we are, and we have an openly queer woman in the Tennessee legislature. So, it's happening. It's happening in these red states.
Don't count Florida out just yet.
Don't count her out.
Trust me, I don't count her out. I definitely count Florida out. But is Florida making me sweat? Absolutely. From you mentioned FIU. A poll just came out that my university just had the highest support for Donald Trump, which is wild to me. So Florida's making me sweat, but I'm not counting it out because I think Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump they'll be gone.
Sorry, Janelle, that message was for the audience, not for you. I know you're not counting Florida out.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, Janelle,
got it out.
Thank you so much. We know that you've got a lot going on, and wishing you the best on these next 2 weeks. And looking forward to seeing what's next for LPAC and all of your candidates.
Yes, please. And for folks who want to do something that are listening, please, we are doing phone bankings every Tuesday night. Actually, it's going on right now, or Wednesday night. Please sign up to join one. Do something. As Michelle Obama said, please do something. We've got 13 days.
Thank you, Janelle.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks again to everyone who is tuning in and watching us across different platforms. We're so grateful. We are getting close to the end here. We have a few more folks to speak to you, and they are incredible. So we're going to bring actually up 2 folks to speak to you at once. Let me bring them to the stage. It's Commissioner Precious Brady Davis and Leah Israel. Thank you so much for both of you for being here with us.
Happy to be here.
Good evening. I'm so glad to be here with you all. Glad to be on with another Chicagoan as well.
Yes. I love your kitchen is amazing.
Thank you.
Well, we're gonna do a quick. Well, you both have very impressive bios, so it may not be super quick, but we're gonna do a little bit of bios. So anyone who may not be familiar with you yet knows who you are. Chris, did you want to go ahead?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you again for being with us. Precious Brady Davis, a Nebraska native, was appointed to the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago by Governor J.B. Pritzker in July 2023. She is the first openly trans Black woman to serve in public office in Cook County history.
Yay! Making history.
Excellent. Additionally, she currently serves as the Chief Strategy Officer at the Center on Halstead, where she began her career as the Youth Outreach Coordinator a decade ago, launching a $1.6 million CDC grant for HIV prevention and LGBTQ leadership development. She also previously served as the Assistant Director of Diversity Recruitment Initiatives at Columbia College Chicago, implementing campus-wide diversity initiatives. For the past 6 years, she served as the Associate Regional Communications Director at Sierra Club, leading campaigns for renewable energy, corporate accountability, and climate change action.
Thank you for being here, Commissioner Brady Davis. Now, for over 20 years, Leah Israel has been a respected consultant in development, advocacy, corporate counsel, and public affairs. She's advised Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, political campaigns, elected officials, and served as the Chief Development Officer for the 2020 and 2024 Democratic National Conventions. Leah has guided presidential and Senate campaigns, including those of Senator Tammy Duckworth and Pete Buttigieg, and worked with organizations like Human Rights Watch and the Victory Fund. She began her activism with FAIR Wisconsin in 2006 and served as a legislative fellow at the U.S. Department of State from 2010 to 2016. Thank you both so much for being here.
So to jump right in, Commissioner Davis, and forgive me, this is a broad question, but we've seen, of course, the effects of climate change with these recent hurricanes that we've experienced tragically. And this is something that's covered extensively in Project 2025, which would dismantle NOAA, which is, I believe, the National, and you can help me here, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, I think.
That's correct.
All right, sweet. And the National Weather Service as well, and privatize these services. What sort of effect would that have on folks especially folks who are already struggling with the effects of climate change?
Like everything Trump touches, it would be dangerous. It would once again serve as an attempt to undermine and reduce our faith in public institution. Mm-hmm. The National Weather Service would be hindered from accurately reporting weather events that conflict with the MAGA agenda. If any space should be nonpartisan, it should be information about reporting the weather.
Right.
It would spread disinformation. We all remember Sharpiegate in 2019 when Trump erroneously claimed that Alabama was on the path of Hurricane Dorian, prompting the National Weather Service to correct the misinformation that he provided. And I think that lives would hang in the balance due to a lack of accurate information, causing people not being ready to prepare for these catastrophic storm events. And I also think that it would breed climate denialism. It would remove career professionals from public service. And so I think those are just a couple of things that it would harm folks in terms of these rollbacks in Project 2025 in regards to climate.
I knew it was going to be that scary, but it's sobering to hear.
It is. And if you don't mind, Commissioner Davis, too, I'm curious because I think a lot of our listeners might be interested to hear what would change if we privatized things like the National Weather Service. Like, why is the National Weather Service and agencies like NOAA, why are they so important that they remain public entities?
These public institutions, it's because we don't need to sell off to private lands, right? We need to preserve our public institutions, right? It reduces faith in government, right? It allows single entities to profitize off of the government, right? And so it's really about how are we holding the faith in our public institutions? How are we trusting the science? How are we trusting the career professionals who have been doing this work for years? How are we trusting the science? And it really would allow for an undermining of science.
Absolutely makes sense. I want to bring this up again. We had this conversation a little bit earlier, but for folks who are just tuning in, trans rights are particularly under attack in this country, and Project 2025 would expand that even further. The playback pushes against transgender-related health care, portraying it as potentially harmful to youth. What are your thoughts on this and how it would negatively impact the trans community in the country? And Leah, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, thanks to News is Out for having me. Thrilled to be joined with Commissioner Brady Davis, big fan of yours, and so many incredible speakers that you've had on today. I mean, I guess let me just say, I came into politics just over 20 years ago today when at the time—
Congratulations on your anniversary.
Vermont was the only state that had civil unions. Marriage equality was so far from being a thing. And that's what, at the time, having newly come out as a lesbian woman, propelled me into politics, entirely the LGBTQ issues. And as many speakers have said already, we've come so far. And Project 2025, and you can see this on the airways right now. I mean, just to contextualize it, the Trump campaign and the allied PACs of his have spent $65 million just since August 1, attacking the trans community, telling mistruths. So I think simply put, that what they are trying to do, which, as every speaker has said, they cannot do, they cannot erase the LGBTQ community. They cannot erase the trans community, but that is what they are trying to do. So I just think, I think about young people, I think about old people who are out as trans, who understand fundamentally that that's who they are, that are about to come out, and how destabilizing and isolating it will be if Trump wins and inevitably Project 2025 becomes a reality.
Commissioner?
I think it would allow for the continuation of dangerous practices like conversion therapy, the banning of LGBTQ books in schools, LGBTQ curriculum. I think it would encourage harassment to an already vulnerable population. And we've already seen in Trump's book that trans people are disposable. We witnessed firsthand Donald Trump saying that when he was president, that trans people could not serve in the military by tweet. And as Leah just pointed out, we have literally seen trans people be the butt of the joke in this campaign, the sacrificial lamb, red meat to the base. They're running this multi-million-dollar ad mocking gender non-conforming folks. And I think it adds to the dehumanization and the devaluing of our lives. We don't have to see what is laid out in just Project 2025 for what will happen to trans people. We can see the behavior that we've seen all along this campaign. Every chance the former president has gotten, he has thrown transgender as an adjective into something, whether it's transgender immigrant surgeries. There's always something red meat to the base. And so I think that this would continue to perpetuate harm.
Leah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about the organization behind Project 2025. The Heritage Foundation is, those of us who follow politics are no stranger to the Heritage Foundation. What do you make of kind of the ascent of the Heritage Foundation in Republican politics of late, as represented by Project 2025?
It says everything about where the Republican is headed and where they've been, which is to the extreme right, and it's deeply upsetting. I was at a work conference over the weekend where former President Bush was speaking, and I was just sort of chuckling to myself, like what I would give to have somebody like him on the other side right now. It's just it's not even just going backwards, right? Like they're trying to outlaw transgender people, and it's awful.
Yeah, and Commissioner Davis, I'm wondering, I feel like climate change is such a great example of a way that you can really tie Project 2025 to real world impacts in people's actual lives and safety, right? Something that's very core and important to people. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts about relaying that message to people and helping people understand what this document represents and what it might do.
I think that this is a significant investment in bringing America back. $2.2 million operation. But I refuse to be overwhelmed, because I think that we have to organize.
Right.
I think that we have to vote our values. We have to elect Democrats up and down the ballot, because that's what they're doing. They want to elect MAGA up and down the ballot from the school boards. That's why it's important why there's someone like me at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, someone who understands the intersection of environmental justice, the LGBTQ community, violence prevention. And so I think that it's about taking this moment, this vital moment in our democracy, that we have to elect Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States. Throughout Project 2025, we see this reoccurring theme of federalism. There already is a blueprint for this that we see with the fall of Roe. And so I think that we have to knock doors, right? We've got to organize. We can't be complacent. We've got 2 more weeks, and I refuse to lay down. I've been working my butt off this campaign cycle, raising money for the vice president. And so we've got to make phone calls. We've got to call our friends. We've got a phone bank. We've got to knock doors. And so we have to organize.
And vote.
Right.
Leah, please, if you have anything you want to add, we'd love to hear it.
No, I mean, the commissioner nailed it. We have to. This is the most consequential election in our lifetime, and we say that every 2 and 4 years. But it is clear that this is it. So I really hope people go out and do what is needed in these final days and go to the ballot box and vote, or mail in.
Yes, however you do it, do it. Thank you both so much. So appreciate you taking the time, and especially Leah, thank you so much for helping do a lot of organization in the back end. We so appreciate that. Thank you. And we wishing you well these next 2 weeks as we all go through the last bit of the elections.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's great
to
to meet
both
you
of you. Okay. Well, Chris, we're almost there. We're almost at the end, and we have 2 more incredible guests to bring on to speak to us.
That's right. That's right. We're so excited. It's been a fantastic lineup. Great conversation.
I mean, incredibly serious conversation, but also a lot of inspiration. I'm walking away feeling a lot better than I did when I came into this.
Yeah.
And like I said, my nose has been stuck in Project 2025 for a couple months now.
God bless you. me too, to some extent, of course,
All right. Well, we have Alan Morris and Kevin Jennings in the wings. We're going to bring them on right now. Hello to both of you. Thank you both so much for being here. We have some bios for you, so we're going to do that real quick so everybody knows how incredible you both are. Chris, take it away.
That's right. So and I'll start with Alan, and thank you both again for being with us. Alan Morris is the Director of Policy for the National LGBTQ Task Force.
Action Fund. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was my typo.
You know what?
Thank you.
An important distinction. We all don't want to mess up the 501c3s and c4s. Previously, Alan founded the first policy team for Texas's largest immigration nonprofit. Alan has over a decade of experience in public policy, immigration, and human rights across various sectors. Throughout his career, Alan has achieved several public policy wins and collaborated with prominent figures in the civil rights movement. So I'm sure we'll have plenty of fodder to discuss with respect to Project 2025.
And Kevin Jennings is a longtime LGBTQ plus equality leader. After becoming the first in his family to graduate college, Harvard, 1985, he helped create the first gay-straight alliance in 1988 as a high school teacher. Thank you for that. He founded GLSEN in 1990, and the first national group fighting anti-LGBTQ plus bias in schools. Jennings later served as the Assistant Secretary of Education under President Obama, leading the anti-bullying campaign, and has since led the Arcus Foundation, the Tennant Museum, and is currently the CEO of Lambda Legal. Thank you both so much for closing us out on this conversation today.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you for the work that your organizations are doing as well.
Incredible work, both of these organizations. Kevin, I'd like to start with you because you not only have legal experience, but you founded GLSEN, and Project 2025 would greatly affect the educational system and the teaching of diverse lessons. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on how Project 2025 would affect the system, and also how Trump's remarks align with this ethos? He said many times he wants to close the Department of Education.
Yes, he has. And that's really dangerous because I was a history teacher many, many years ago. So let me do a little history lesson. The reason we have a federal Department of Education, which we didn't have until the 1980s, is for 2 reasons. First of all, education was largely controlled solely at the local level before the advent of the federal Department of Education. And that Department of Education was created to fix 2 problems. First of all, in conservative local districts and states, the districts and states were not obeying civil rights laws. They were simply refusing to do so. And then secondly, schools are funded by local taxes. And in poor communities, that means that schools got less resources. So the Department of Education was essentially created to level the playing field. And under both the Obama and Biden administrations, it has done so aggressively on the issues of sexual orientation and gender identity. Dana, thanks for the kind introduction. I was proud to lead the Obama administration's anti-bullying efforts, which resulted in bullying being at the lowest level it had ever been recorded when we left office in 2016. The Biden administration has picked up on that work and has been particularly aggressive in issuing regulations to protect trans students from discrimination. Essentially, what Project 2025 wants to do is wipe all that away and return control of schools completely to the local level. What that will do is strip civil rights protections from students, not just based on gender identity and sexual orientation, I might add, but gender, sex, ability status, race, all kinds of categories that currently the federal government makes sure schools do not discriminate on the basis of. And frankly, it will screw poor communities because they'll have even less money for their schools. So Project 2025 is a real danger, and it could make our already very unequal system of education even more unequal.
Thank you. I don't think we often hear the explanation of the Department of Education. All we hear is we want to close the Department of Education, and no one ever says why, and or why it was established. So thank you for that history lesson, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Once a teacher, always a teacher, Dana. Can't help myself.
No, I think it's so important, and it leads me to a follow-up question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm curious. I don't want to ask you to put yourself inside the heads of the people that drafted this document, but if you were to for a minute, do you imagine that their desire to abolish the National Department of Education has more to do with their beliefs about small government, or do you believe it has more to do with not wanting regulations concerning things like civil rights, LGBTQ rights, and that kind of thing?
I think it's even deeper than that, Chris. I think deep down they don't believe in public education.
Okay.
They want to go to a voucher-based system where people can use tax dollars to enroll their kids in private schools and essentially get rid of the whole idea of having public schools in this country. Mm-hmm. They will do everything they can to undermine the public school system in this nation because they fundamentally don't believe in it.
And in its place would be, I suppose, a charter and private school system that that does not have any kind of oversight by the government. And is that intentional?
That is absolutely intentional. That local control has always been code for we don't have to obey civil rights laws. Mm-hmm. That is essentially what it is. Whenever you hear the phrase local control, get very, very nervous and very, very suspicious. Because when schools were controlled locally in the era before Brown versus the Board of Education, which banned segregation in schools, we saw what we got. We got segregation. We got substandard schools. We got discrimination based on a variety of factors. And by abolishing the Department of Education and all the regulations that put in place to protect students, we'll be going backwards in this country, really to the era before Brown versus the Board of Education, which was ruled in 1954.
It's amazing stuff. Alan, I'm curious, and we've been talking kind of throughout this series about the need to communicate with people about topics that seem kind of nebulous and abstract. At the task force, how do you approach discussions about Project 2025, this 900-page policy document from the Heritage Foundation? How does that translate into concrete terms?
Well, first and foremost, thank you both for having me here. I'm so excited. Well, I think what's important for us to consider just as a movement is the intention behind Project 2025, right? And having intentional conversations with various partners on the ground has been our focus, right? What's happening in these battleground states where they're talking about Project 2025 and what that impact looks like and what a national org like the task force can do to amplify that message, right? Mm-hmm. It always brings me to, we recently had a convening with some of our, closest partners, and something that kept coming up is why are we pouring so much credence into Project 2025, right? Why do we care? Because this organization has done this before. And something that I kept telling the partner was that when you give someone an inch, they'll take a mile, right? So we can't give them an inch. Everyone needs to understand exactly what it is and what those impacts look like.
Well, Project 2025 aims to reduce federal government involvement in certain areas, like Chris mentioned earlier. How could this change the way that federal agencies address things like anti-LGBTQ violence and civil rights protections?
Well, this something I was having a conversation with some of my colleagues, and I said, y'all, we're already fighting just for the Equality Act to get passed, right? So
what is it, 60 years now, I think it
Exactly. I mean, it's the fight for federal non-discrimination protections. And we're going to sit up here and we're going to say that we're going to allow someone like Trump to be, emboldened by the Heritage Foundation to have something like Project 2025 come to light. No. And it's about what can happen. That's decreased enforcement.
in every imaginable way, right? When we talk about housing, it's hard enough for trans people to even go seek out housing without someone seeing them and saying, nope, I'm not going to do it just based on how you look. It's hard enough for a immigrant to come to the border and say, I was mistreated because I'm trans or just because I'm gay. And now I have to worry about a culturally competent, officer either seeing me or saying, I don't believe you, right? If this comes to light, then that means that everything that we think about in regards to the little bit of protections that we have now and everything that we've been fighting for the last 2 decades, that's going to be gone like that. And that's how we have to think about what does it look like when we say it's going to reduce so many different barriers that we have set up and that so many of Black and brown people have fought for. When we think about the South and how the South had to go through Jim Crow and we fought for civil rights, right? It's going to retract so many different things that even my grandmother fought for. And so it is something that is very intentional and personal, and people have to see it with that same level of intention. But also, if this is something that may not impact me, it is something that's going to impact someone that I love. So I'm going to stand up for them.
I'd like to jump in here because I think Alan just made a really important point about the Equality Act. Your listeners and viewers are much smarter than the average bear, and they know that there is no federal law that guarantees non-discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation. So in the absence of that, we often rely on federal regulations. And Project 2025 has been absolutely clear that it will repeal all federal regulations that ban discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. You may say, well, what does that really mean, Kevin? Let me give you a very specific example. About 40% of all kids in foster care are LGBTQ+. Now that you may think, well, how many kids are there in foster care? 388,000 in this country.
Wow.
So that means we're talking about approximately 150,000 LGBTQ+ youth who are in foster care. Right now, thanks to federal regulations, they cannot be discriminated against, and they must be protected from harm based on gender identity and sexual orientation. Not only does Project 25 propose repealing those regulations so that it would be open season on those young people, it goes an even step further with a concept that our opponents like to call religious exemptions. Religious exemptions allow people to refuse to obey the law, the non-discrimination law, if it conflicts with their religion. Instead of calling it a religious exemption, we prefer to call it what it is at Lambda Legal, a license to discriminate. Now, right now, foster parents who are not going to support LGBTQ+ youth because of their religion will not have an LGBTQ+ youth placed in their home. They will be denied the right to have such a child. If Project 2025 is enacted, the non-discrimination regulations go away. In their place comes this new crazy regulation that says that, well, if it offends your religion, you don't have to obey it. And all of a sudden, LGBTQ+ foster kids, of which there are 150,000, as I mentioned earlier, may be finding themselves placed in homes where people want to pray the gay out of them or control their gender expression. And there's no escape once you're placed in that home. So that's just a microcosm of one program within one department of the federal government and the incredible impact that repealing regulations and putting in place licenses to discriminate could have on the lives of tens of thousands of LGBTQ+ youth.
Wow. And also, I just want to add to this that with the rise of LGBTQ suicide rates among children and teenagers, any lack of protection within these agencies will lead to cycles of victimization and trauma. Mm-hmm. So, and this is something that all of us hold the key to making sure that does not happen.
Thank you both for bringing that up. That's such an important conversation to have. And that's why we're talking about Project 2025, is that there's so many elements to it that I don't think people even understand. Mm-hmm. It just kind of is this kind of scary thing, but you dial down into it and you're there's all these elements of our society it could affect. Do you have, either of you or both of you have any final thoughts that you want to share about Project 2025 or what your work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, the queer Russian-American author Masha Gessen wrote an article called Surviving Autocracy, actually a book. And they said that the number one rule of surviving autocracy is this: believe the autocrat. Yeah. When the autocrat says they're going to do something, they're going to do it. So Project 2025 isn't just words on paper. This is a blueprint. And should the Trump campaign be successful, they are planning to implement this blueprint, and they will go further than the blueprint. We will see even worse than what they've already put on paper. A lot of people live in fantasy land where they think, oh, they're not going to go that far. It won't be that bad. It's just a document. It is not. Believe them when they say they plan to make us second-class citizens. They have a plan to do it, and they will execute if given the opportunity.
So if I may, with one more question for both of you, to bring this home, I'm curious, and starting with Kevin, as an organization, how is Lambda Legal thinking about its work in the event that Project 2025 is actually effectuated and Trump is elected and so on? How will that impact the choice of cases that you choose to litigate and all of the work that Lambda Legal does?
Well, sadly, we have seen this movie once before, from 2017 to 2021. And during that time period, we filed over 40 lawsuits against the Trump administration. And I'm proud to say we won every single one of them.
Wow.
So our attorneys know what they're doing. And in the event that Project 2025 becomes a reality under a second Trump administration, we're really going to have to count on the courts to be our protection. So we have been planning for months for various scenarios that could happen as a result of the election, whether Vice President Harris or former President Trump wins. We are ready. We have seen the movie before. We don't want to see the movie again, but if we do see the movie again, we know how to win it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would just add to that the task force is going to, one, look for ways to partner with organizations like Lambda Legal, right? But also it is giving the power to the people, right? This is more than about Project 2025, especially when we talk about this election cycle, right? And it's more about voting about yourself. It's about voting for your loved ones. So arming people with as much knowledge and information, navigating a very complicated time and season with the media is going to be very important for us. And that's something that the task force is already planning. Like how do we show up and how do we get our people on the Hill to have those intentional conversations with lawmakers, right? How do we bring in clergy members to have intentional conversations on how do we humanize these issues and stop vilifying communities that are already going through enough?
Yeah, there's one last point I'd like to make. Speaking of seeing the movie before, we just issued a report yesterday on the impact of the judges appointed by Donald Trump on LGBTQ plus equality. 234 judges were appointed by Donald Trump during his tenure, the most by any single-term president in history up to that point in time. 40% of them, Lambda Legal showed, had documented records of anti-LGBTQ plus bias. And guess what they've done? They've issued anti-LGBTQ plus rulings.
Yeah.
So another thing that we are picking on November 5th is a judiciary. We have at least 2 Supreme Court justices who've approached retirement age, Justices Thomas and Alito, and their successors could be on the bench for a very long time. Let me give you a very specific example. The extreme right judge, Amy Coney Barrett, who succeeded Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if she lives to the same age as Justice Ginsburg did, she'll still be on the bench in 2059. So we have to live with the consequences of these appointments for decades to come. So when you go into the voting booth, and I want to be clear, Lambda Legal is a 501c3 nonprofit. We don't endorse candidates. But you're not just voting for a presidential candidate, you're voting for a judiciary. And a judiciary that could either be very hostile or very supportive of LGBTQ plus rights. Keep that in mind on November 5th as well.
Thank you both so much for being here and for the incredible work that you're doing. words escape me how important what you're doing is for our community. So thank you to you both. I've been wishing everyone a good luck for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's gonna be intense, but we so appreciate your work and appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
That's it, Chris. That's the end of the Project 2025 discussion. And I want to thank you. You came in the clutch to be a co-moderator with me, and I am a huge fan of your work at the Washington Blade.
Likewise.
An incredible journalist, Washington correspondent, White House correspondent, just amazing work. So thank you to you. And I also want to thank Michelle Pelletier, who has been working backstage this whole time, Penny Reardon at News is Out, who has been tweeting and posting and doing all sorts of social media, Mark Siegel and Sandra Morris, who were backstage in case anything happened, and all of the members of News is Out who reached out to the people they knew and asked if they could be a part of this. So thank you.
And I echo everything Dana just said, and likewise, I couldn't have asked for a better co-host. Thank you for everything.
And best to all of you watching, thank you for tuning in, or if you're watching this later on, thank you for watching, and we're wishing you the best in the next 2 weeks and beyond.
Absolutely. Good luck, everybody. Brew some strong coffee.
We're going to need it.